Have you ever felt like your vote doesn't really count? Well, what if I told you that not so long ago, some people's votes literally counted for 3 times more than other people's? Yeah, seriously. Today, we're going to unpack the Supreme Court case that changed all of that. Wesberry v. Sanders, the case that gave us the powerful idea of one person, one vote.
I mean, think about it for a second. Should your vote have the exact same weight as someone's vote in the next town over, or maybe in a different part of your state? It seems like a total no-brainer, right? Of course it should. But for a huge chunk of American history, it just didn't.
To really get why, we need to rewind the clock back to the early 1960s and head down to Georgia. This is where the value of your vote completely depended on your zip code.
Okay, just look at these numbers. Georgia's 5th congressional district, which included the city of Atlanta, had almost 823,000 people living in it. At the same time, another district in the state had only about 272,000 people. Now, here's the absolutely wild part. Both of these districts got to elect just one representative to Congress. That meant a voter in that smaller, rural district had roughly 3 times the voting power of a voter in the big city. Their vote was literally worth more.
So how on earth did things get so skewed, and what did people finally do about it? Well, this question brings us right to the heart of our case.
Well, for starters, the map Georgia was using was ancient. It was drawn up back in 1931 and hadn't been touched since. As cities like Atlanta exploded in population, the districts just stayed the same. So in 1962, a group of voters, including a guy named James Wesberry, filed a lawsuit. They argued that this system was totally unconstitutional. But the first court that heard the case basically just threw it out. They said it wasn't their job to get involved, calling it a political question.
And what in the world is a political question? Well, it's pretty much the court's way of throwing up their hands and saying, hey, this is a messy problem for the politicians to fix, not for us judges. For decades, courts used this exact idea to dodge making any rulings on how voting maps were drawn. But the voters in Georgia, they weren't taking no for an answer. They appealed their case all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court.
And that left the 9 justices with this massive question to answer. A question that really gets to the very heart of what our democracy is all about.
Believe it or not, this entire case, this huge debate, really boiled down to just 4 little words from Article 1 of the Constitution, that representatives are chosen by the people. So, the big question for the court was this: what did the founders actually mean by that? Does by the people imply that every single person's vote should count the same, or was it okay for some votes to be way more powerful than others? That was the whole ballgame.
The Supreme Court decided to take on this huge question, and its answer was about to change American elections forever.
And on February 17, 1964, the decision finally came down. The court's decision was simple, direct, and powerful. Yes, by the people means every vote should be equal. Georgia's lopsided map was officially declared unconstitutional.
Justice Hugo Black, writing for the majority, laid it out perfectly. He wrote that the Constitution demands that, as nearly as is practicable, one man's vote in a congressional election is to be worth as much as another. And that powerful phrase, that's what became known as the one person, one vote principle.
Now, it wasn't a unanimous slam dunk. The majority of justices argued that the phrase, by the people, was put there by the founders to guarantee everyone had equal representation. But some justices disagreed. Their main argument was that the Constitution gives Congress the power to handle districting, and that the court was seriously overstepping by getting involved. Okay, so a decision from way back in 1964, why should we care about it today? Well, because its impact was immediate, and it was absolutely massive. Instantly, states all across the country had to scramble to redraw their congressional maps to make sure all their districts had roughly the same number of people. This caused a huge shift in political power, moving it away from the less populated rural areas and into the growing cities and suburbs. And really importantly, this ruling completely overturned that old case, Colgrove v. Green. Shattering the whole idea that drawing maps was just a political question, the Supreme Court was now officially a protector of our voting rights.
And you know, Wesberry wasn't a one-off. It was a key piece in a trio of game-changing voting rights cases. First, back in 1962, you had Baker v. Carr, which basically opened the courthouse doors for these kinds of lawsuits. Then came our case, Wesberry, in '64, applying the rule to the U.S. House. And later that same year, another case called Reynolds v. Sims extended that one-person, one-vote rule to state legislatures too.
So the Wesberry case solved one huge problem. Districts now have to be equal in population.
But it also opened up a whole new can of worms, a massive question we are still fighting over today. If the number of people has to be equal, what's the fairest way can actually draw the lines on the map? That's the challenge of gerrymandering, and it's a debate that really all started right here. So I'll leave you with that. What do you think?